Alright everyone, this has been a seriously anticipated release for this year and I can't wait to review with you guys Watch Me by Tahereh Mafi. I literally binged the whole entire Shatter Me series just so I would be able to read this when it first came out. And I'm honestly going to say this is probably my favorite design of the whole entire Shatter Me series, and this is the spinoff. Guys, this thing is gorgeous. I don't know if you can see like the holographic design of the book, but it is so beautiful. It's probably the prettiest book on my bookshelf right now. And before I started reading, I literally stared at it for probably like 10 minutes just looking at how pretty it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to review it for you guys. I'll let you know before there are any spoilers. So let's go ahead and get into this review. I'm basically going to give you a little blurb before we get started with the review. This new book, Watch Me, is basically about James, which is Adam and Aaron's younger brother. He's now all grown up and he is trying to infiltrate Ark Island, which is the last remaining basically part of the reestablishment, and they're thriving and no one has ever infiltrated them, so James decides that he's going to do it. And in Ark Island there's a girl named Rosabelle who is very different from everyone on there. She's trying to save her sick sister and the reestablishment thinks that her sister's just a waste of space because she's sick. And so Rosabelle is trying to save her sister. She's trying to prove to the reestablishment that she's good and that she's not a rebel and all of this good stuff. And it's basically them meeting each other and Rosabelle being a trained assassin and getting mixed up with James and everyone else in the New Republic. Very short blurb. Didn't really want to tell you a lot before getting to the review. With that being said, in my review, I'm going to go over the writing style. I'm going to go over the plot and I'm going to go over the characters because we all love to hear about the characters. And then I'll tell you what I liked about this book, what I didn't like, and I'm going to go into the spoilers. I will tell you who our cameos are in the novel once we get to the characters. So let's go ahead and get into this review and you'll get to hear everything. So with the writing style, you get the same flourish and beautiful prose that you got from the Shatter Me series, but a lot of it isn't from journal entries like it was with Juliet's journals. In Watch Me, you get a lot of this beautiful prose coming from Rosabelle as she's stuck in her own mind. If you've read anything in Watch Me and you've gotten a few chapters in, even a few chapters in, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. But Rosabelle sometimes gets stuck in her mind and she just thinks, and honestly, like you get these flashback scenes, but they aren't really flashbacks. It's really cool. And so all of this beautiful prose is coming from Rosabelle's flashbacks / thoughts. That was really beautiful, and it was cool that Tahereh Mafi incorporated this into Watch Me because everyone loved Juliet's journal so much, so you saw this come full circle basically to the new spin-off series. As far as like other things you should know about the writing style for Watch Me, if you enjoyed the Shatter Me series, you will enjoy this book. I don't think it's going to be a huge disappointment for anyone who truly enjoyed reading Shatter Me and all of the other novels. And there were just a few things that kind of really was like, I didn't really like that in this book for me. Even though many people would fight me to say that Watch Me is better than Shatter Me, even though my Goodreads rankings would show that Watch Me is better than Shatter Me. But we're not going to get into that today. So with the plot, you basically have James as he's all grown up and he's infiltrating Ark Island, which is the last establishment of the reestablishment. That's a weird sentence. So there's a reason Aaron Warner never tried to infiltrate Ark Island, and James realizes that and learns that once he infiltrates it because he sees all of this high tech, this evolution of technology that the reestablishment has been able to do that the New Republic cannot. So they basically have something called the Nexus, which is super similar to the way that they were using Juliet's sister in Defy Me. If you've read the whole Shatter Me series, you know what I'm going to talk about. And this is revealed very early on in the book, so it's not a spoiler or anything. But the Nexus, you're learning basically that the reestablishment had a backup plan to control the minds of everyone from the beginning. So in the very, very beginning of the book, you learn that the reestablishment is still coming for the world and wants to basically take over everything. So as far as the plot goes, it wasn't super different from any of the other Shatter Me books. You do get Rosabelle and James's point of view, so those are the only two point of views in the book. The first half of the book, I really enjoyed it in terms of plot because they're on Ark Island and they're doing all of these things against the reestablishment, and Rosabelle is actually this assassin who's coming after James. It was really cool. But then you get to the second half of the book and it's different, but it's still good. It just wasn't as engaging, in my opinion, until you get to the last part of the book. The story as a whole kind of got complicated towards the end, and I feel like there were too many different loose ends and threads that were going into this book, even though the world building, guys, was so much better than the original series. And you can really tell that Tahereh Mafi as a writer and an author has grown so much since initially writing this series. And I really, really enjoyed seeing that growth. And I talked about that too when I did my reviews for Reveal Me, Defy Me, and Imagine Me. You could see the growth as an author because the world building and the development all grow with her writing. So I enjoyed that in terms of plot. Like, you could see that she built out a lot more than she did in the previous books. So the characters were honestly the most similar thing to the Shatter Me series. James feels like a spin-off of Kenji. So he literally feels like he's Kenji's counterpart. Not even counterpart, just like a clone of Kenji. And you get to see Kenji a few times in this novel, and that's one of the cameos. But there were points where Kenji and James were in the same room and having a conversation with other people, and I literally could not tell who was who. If they wouldn't have said James said, Kenji said. They were so similar that I was kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this. I really love this personality type that Tahereh Mafi came up with for Kenji, but I wish it would have stayed for Kenji and James would have gotten a little more autonomy, if that makes sense. As far as Rosabelle goes, she felt like a mixture of Juliet and her sister. Rosabelle has this inner monologue most of the time. She's dark and twisty. She's trying to hide all of her emotions from the reestablishment, and she's honestly like this little assassin serial killer. There are these points in the novel, though, where her true self comes out and you see this girl who just wants to break free of all of the chains that the reestablishment has put on her. And that's where the Juliet similarities come in. But the thing with Rosabelle is Rosabelle's not this soft, sweet person like Juliet was in the Shatter Me series. Rosabelle has much harsher edges, and she felt more like the mind control version of Juliet in Imagine Me, which that's a whole nother complicated storyline in itself. But that's who Rosabelle is as a character and her personality, and you have these moments where she's like, okay, the emotions are coming out. You're dead. You've been dead. You don't have feelings. Just die. And she would tell that to herself, and it was so emotional, and it literally added so much depth to this novel that I really, really, really enjoyed it. It was so heartbreaking and so well developed in her character, and I can't wait to see more of her later on in this series. In terms of cameos, I promised I'd mention them. You see Juliet, you see Warner, you see Kenji, you see Winston, you don't see, but you hear about Nazira. There are a couple more, but none that are super, super memorable. So those are the main ones, and you actually get scenes with them, and there are more storylines for their characters. You just never get to see from their point of view. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed seeing the growth in their characters and the development for their characters as well. So basically, this book gets a higher rating than a lot of the other ones in the series because the world building was great. I really loved Rosabelle's character. And we finally get to see a full amount of effort into this book, and you get to see that Tahereh Mafi really put thought into something besides just the characters. Because I feel like the Shatter Me series, the main problem that I had with the Shatter Me series is that there was more put into the characters than there was for the plot. And for this type of novel and this type of series with this dystopian, you have to have a ton of world building, and it wasn't there for the Shatter Me series, but it is here for Watch Me, which is why I really enjoyed it. I just hope we don't have another crazy ending like Imagine Me, because that was not it for me. Okay, spoilers. I have some serious questions about the cliffhangers that are in this novel, and I mean serious. So I'm gonna sum them up basically, and it's gonna be quick little bullet points. And they're just things that I'm like, okay, I don't know how this is gonna go. I'm really looking forward to the next novel, so let's see. Basically, my thoughts are going 100 miles an hour, thinking, okay, what's going to happen to Rosabelle's little sister? Is she getting tortured? Is she in asylum? What are we doing? How the heck are all of the members of the reestablishment infiltrating the New Republic, because it felt like everywhere that Rosabelle turned, there was someone from the reestablishment there. And I was like, how is this happening? Maybe it's because of the Nexus, whatever. Does Rosabelle have powers? Because obviously she can turn her brain off, apparently, pretend like she's dead, and then just come back to life. And the Nexus can't be connected to her, which is why it's making me think that she does have powers in some way. Is Juliet going to be okay during the birth of her baby? This is a big one. Even though she's a tiny subplot in this series, obviously everyone wants to know if Juliet is going to survive. I can't imagine that Tahereh Mafi is going to kill her off. I think she's going to be fine, but like, I want to know. And last but not least, why did Rosabelle's dad abandon their family? And how is this meeting going to go when they finally see each other again? Because I'm interested. And I think that that's going to be a huge showdown slash not showdown, but I'm really excited to see what happens with that. Those are my spoilers. Those are my questions. And honestly, all of those questions make me very excited to see the next book in this series. All right, so that's my whole review for Watch Me by Tahereh Mafi. It's a spinoff of the Shatter Me series. It's basically about the New Republic. I honestly really enjoyed reading this novel. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series, and the world building was great, even if the pacing of the plot felt a little lackluster at times. Her characters are on point, as always. I loved Rosabelle, and to give it a rating, I'd probably give it a 3.5 out of 5, but round it up to 4 for all of the social platforms. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on the spoilers, the cliffhangers, everything. And if you like this video, please subscribe, because I always make videos like this